Hey everybody, my name's Joe Pivarunas. I'm the founder and managing editor of Nanalyze. We're a boutique media and research firm covering tech investing for a broad audience of institutional and retail investors across the globe. Today we want to talk about a company called AbCellera, and the slide here says why it's so attractive. There's a couple reasons why investors have been looking at AbCellera lately, and one may not be so obvious. That's the motivation uncertainty effect, which psychologists have found over numerous studies manifests itself among humans. So the concept is that we are far more motivated by uncertain rewards than we are by rewards that are known. So an example might be your total compensation at your job. There's a salary component and a bonus component. Well, that bonus component is a lot more motivating for people than the salary, and that's probably intuitive. And this helps explain why people like gambling or fishing or hunting or any sort of activity where the outcome is uncertain. Now, before we get into how that relates to AbCellera and it relates to their business model, we're going to talk a little bit about what the company does. So they're in the business of antibodies, and these are Y-shaped proteins that lock onto the body's foreign invaders, whether they're bacteria or viruses or parasites. Now, antibody-based therapeutics have accounted for, in 2019, over $140 billion in sales, and were 5 of the top 10 selling therapeutics. 90% of approved antibody drugs have been derived from natural immune systems. So what the company does is that they look for cells that make particular antibodies of interest. So each of us at any given time are making a billion different antibodies to protect our bodies. And each of those antibodies is made by a single cell. So in order to create a desired antibody, you need to find the cell that makes it. Now that's quite difficult to do because there's over 100 trillion possible antibodies that can be created. So what AbCellera does is they find the cells that make particular antibodies, and here's the way that their platform works. So first, they generate a high-quality universe of antibodies for a target. So from that universe, they'll isolate the cells that make antibodies that have the desired properties. And then, this is fascinating, they actually decode the genetic sequences of selected antibodies of interest. They collect data on the therapeutic properties of those antibodies. And then the cool part, they use molecular engineering to optimize and reformat their lead antibodies. It's absolutely remarkable. So they're using all kinds of interesting technology in there, from cell sorting to big data to gene editing. So really fascinating stuff. Now, what we want to focus on today is the business model of the company. So they have 36 partners that are working on 136 drug discovery projects. Here are where the main revenues come from for AbCellera. So first bullet point, and these are in order of when they will arrive. So first they'll arrive at research fees. These are payments for technology access and performance of research. Then you have milestone payments, and we'll look at those in a second. These are payments that accompany, clinical and commercial milestones. And then the biggest component, royalties. These are a percentage that AbCellera will receive on an approved therapeutic. So when you look at all the partners that are working with AbCellera, there's some real big names here. You have Regeneron, Novartis, Pfizer, Eli Lilly, Moderna. So they have quite a few interesting partners. On the right-hand side, you can see how they're announcing new partnerships every year. So that's great. More and more clients are being attracted to their platform. Now, AbCellera has been quite interesting in the past several years because of the work they did with Eli Lilly on a COVID medicine. Now, we're going to talk about that in a second, but what we've done here is backed out the Eli Lilly COVID revenues and then took a look at what they've actually realized outside of Eli Lilly, which is a special case. Well, they've realized research fees for 2020 around 35 million, with 3 partners making up 3/4 of that, and then 8 partners making up the other quarter. And then in 2021, 4 partners made up 2/3, and then 12 partners made up another third. So this is interesting because it shows us the total number of active partners that are paying research fees. So when we look at the latest 10K, we can then go on to milestone payments. Now, it's important to note that aside from Eli Lilly, they have not, AbCellera has not received any milestone payments yet. So this table here reflects their expectations, what they hope to achieve. On the left-hand side, you can see they're hoping to achieve $4.6 billion worth of milestone payments. And if you divide that by the total number of drug programs they have, that's about $33.8 million for a successful drug. Now, they did not weight this by probability. So we'll talk about that in a second because it's highly unlikely that all 136 drug programs will be a success. On the right-hand side of this table, you can see how they've been arranging royalties for different buckets of contracts. So those royalties will come in play when drugs are commercialized. Now, when we look at those milestone payments, we need to realize that AbCellera has said the likelihood of a molecule that they discover reaching phase 1 clinical trials is 37%. So you can reduce the milestone payments by that percentage likelihood. Then there's another metric that says following the start of phase 1, antibody drugs have had historically an approximate 18.5% likelihood of receiving market authorization. So you can visualize now this funnel. And then this third metric is quite remarkable, that the average antibody drug takes between 9.4 and 12 years from initiation to approval. So we really shouldn't be that surprised that AbCellera hasn't realized any milestone payments yet. Now, let's talk a little bit about Eli Lilly. One of our readers made a very good point and said that when looking at AbCellera, the Eli Lilly success story can provide a accelerated look at how the platform might work. That the fact that AbCellera has realized over $500 million in revenues from Eli Lilly and this COVID drug shows how the platform can be quite successful. So if you're not familiar with the story, AbCellera helped discover this drug. Not going to try to say the name of that drug, from a single blood sample that was to treat COVID. That drug then advanced into clinical testing 90 days after the program was initiated. And then today, it's been used to treat over 1 million patients and, of course, fill AbCellera's coffers with over $548 million in cash. So when we look at the breakdown of revenues from Eli Lilly, royalties make up a large majority. Milestone revenues make up a very small component. So they've brought in $526 million in royalties versus $23 million in milestone payments. So we can perhaps conclude from this example that AbCellera won't be raking in the big bucks until they start realizing royalties. Now, if we look at the milestone payments that they're expecting, if we visualize what their funnel might look like after the first drug succeeds, that drug that achieves commercialization. So the first one that does, we'd have one drug having hit a commercial milestone. Then moving backwards, regulatory milestones, maybe there's another drug that just achieved a regulatory milestone, and maybe there's 4 drugs that have achieved clinical milestones and 8 in preclinical. So this is the sort of funnel or the sort of progress we'd expect to see on the platform when the first successful drug has been commercialized. Now, we previously published a video on 4 AI drug discovery companies that were trading at 50% off, literally, some trading even more. And we had spoken quite a bit about Recursion, the fact that we really like the company, what they're doing, and the fact that they have 4 phase 1 drugs that they're trying to show as their first success. So if we compared these two firms, they're both similar in that the likelihood of future rewards is quite uncertain, and the magnitude of those rewards is quite uncertain. So what we've kind of seen after looking at both firms is that, the obvious difference, AbCellera doesn't have any candidates in phase 1. Recursion has 4, but we also see that AbCellera provides a great deal of rich metrics in their 10K about how many milestone payments they have or haven't met and the progress they're making across their customer base. So we think that both these firms are quite interesting. Investors who have a bit more tolerance for risk may want to look at these firms that are both trading at a significant discount. It's interesting to see how on this analysis conducted by Frost and Sullivan, they put both AbCellera and Recursion in the upper right. So just to conclude, we think these firms are particularly appealing to investors, not only because they're heavily discounted at the moment, because they offer this potential very large rewards down the road. Now, as risk-averse investors, we're more prone to wait until we see some commercial success. Now, of course, the shares will trade at a premium, and we're more than happy to pay a premium in exchange for knowing that the platform is able to produce commercial drugs as these firms say they'll be able to. Now, if you're more risk hungry, you could buy shares right now of AbCellera and Recursion at a 60% discount to what institutional investors paid at the IPO. So these companies have been quite beaten down, and they're probably some of the more interesting leaders in this space. So there's an opportunity for people to pick up shares on the cheap. That's not to say they won't get cheaper. So that's about all. Thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have any comments, please just put them in the comment section of the video. In the description, we'll also include the research pieces that were used to produce this video. Thank you very much for your time.